Hello there, hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, we will be doing a recap of a 2019 sci-fi thriller movie. Trust me, this is a really fun movie with an unpredictable end. So just sit back and enjoy the recap. The movie focuses on a young couple, James and Sophie. Both of them just moved into their new home and are excited for the future. Everything seems great and it looks like they finally have the perfect life they hoped for, until one day a call disrupts a romantic period. The call comes in, James picks up the phone and hears terrible news. His father just died. Now the young couple has to move again, they have to adapt to this sudden change. James' father used to run a multi-million-dollar company, and now that he is dead, James has to step up to fill that role. But the company isn't the only thing James has to fill. His father's mansion is now without an owner, and this is where James comes in. Very early the next morning, James and Sophie move into the huge mansion. But they aren't the only ones here. James's father had several slaves performing different domestic tasks. Basically, these are the ones that keep the house running. The next day, James leaves for work very early. Sophie also gets up and makes her way to the kitchen, where she sees that Rose, one of the maids, wants to make her coffee, but she turns down the offer and leaves the kitchen. In the afternoon, Rose comes again to ask her about lunch, but once again Sophie isn't interested. Sophie even asks Rose to take the day off, but Rose does not want to. She is happy doing her job. The thing is, it is not that Sophie isn't hungry or not in the mood for food, but she just isn't used to the life of luxury. She has never had to live with a maid, but now she is forced to live with several maids, and the switch happened overnight. Sophie is not used to all of these, and in the end, she laid off all the maids. James, on the other hand, is at work, worried. He does not know if he can properly fill his father's shoes. There's a large-scale project on the way, and he is worried he will mess it up, but his new assistant comforts him and assures him that they will tackle all the problems that come the company's way together. To add to James' stress, he comes back that night and realizes that his wife has sacked every single maid. He is shocked by this and also isn't happy. But at this point, he does not have a choice. He is forced to respect his wife's decision. This issue did not lead to a big night, and it didn't stop them from having a couple's night. The next day, James is in a very important meeting at work. He is with investors and they are talking about a new potential business when a phone rings. It is Sophie. As if James' wife calling at such a crucial time, interrupting such an important call isn't weird enough, when James picks up the call and hears why she called, he is completely put off. She's calling because she's having trouble with the lawn mower and she wants James to come operate it. Later that night, we see James struggling with the lawn mower and finally getting it to work. Remember, all these would not be happening if Sophie had not sacked all the domestic workers. James realizes this and he is pissed. The next day, at work, James gets another call from Sophie. She talks to him about how she's having trouble handling the domestic tasks back at home, but she still doesn't regret laying off the domestic staff and isn't going to bring any of them back. James is just left there feeling helpless. Later that day, he talks to his assistant about the problems he's having with his wife at home, and his assistant claims he has a solution to their problem. The solution is for them to employ robots to help with the domestic tasks. Before James' father died, an advanced robotic company brought this idea to him. Next, we see James and Sophie visit the company. They meet the owner, Julian, and he presents them with different robots. All look exactly human, and it will be almost impossible to spot the difference. If you did have any prior knowledge about the robot's real identity, you'd think they're human just like you. To test their competence, Sophie strikes up a conversation with one of the robots, and it answers very intelligently and naturally. They then opt in to buy one of the male-looking robots after Sophie insists that she does not want any female robot. They buy a male robot. His name is Henry. Julian then gives them instructions on how to use the robot and also tells them the robot will adapt more as they use it. Back at home, Henry is already acting like the perfect maid. He's already making breakfast, taking care of the lawn. Sophie still finds all this weird, but James tells her that now has no choice but to get used to it. He suggests that she gives Henry as many tasks as possible, so she can get used to him more. One day, Sophie comes out of the shower and sees Henry in her room. She does not know she isn't alone and is not dressed. She is shocked to see him, and she tells him to leave, and he does. She then calls her husband to tell him about what just happened, but he is more focused on work-related problems. He just got bad news about a failed contract. That night, Henry and James play again, and they have a conversation about God. Henry tells James that he does not believe in God but his creator, in this case Julian. But as days go by, Henry and Sophie get closer as they start doing more things together. James is often at work, leaving Sophie alone with Henry. They do all the chores together, and we already know that Henry is a world-class robot. He knows how to adapt and he learns really fast. This makes him a good listener and even a chat partner. They even start reading books together. But not just with Sophie. Henry also worms his way up to James. He also also builds a nice relationship with Henry, but he is closer to Sophie as they spend more time together. And slowly, she starts feeling something for Henry. One night, Sophie wakes up and she hears a noise. She goes outside and she sees Henry lying on the floor completely naked. She wakes him up and tries to find out what happened. Henry tells her that he does not know how he got there and he has been having dreams lately. This comes as a shock, because why would a robot be dreaming? As she tries to take the robot back inside, James joins them outside. James first finds the whole scene weird. Why is his wife outside in the middle of the night with a naked male robot? She explains all that happened to James and he takes the robot back inside. The next day, Julian comes over to check the robot. After diagnosis, he concludes that it is just a small error, and for the dreams, the robot is only adapting to what it is being exposed to. After Julian leaves, the couple argue about who is exposing the robot to these experiences. Later that night, James tries to reconcile with Sophie and asks that they make love, but she turns him down. She isn't in the mood. One day, we see Henry massaging Sophie, but this becomes more serious as Henry kisses her. She does not object and he climbs on her and they kiss more intensely. But Sophie wakes up and we see that it is just a dream. But Sophie really enjoyed it, and later in the day she thinks about the dream and starts masturbating to it. As all this was happening, the room door was open. As she finishes, she comes by the door and sees Henry leave. She confirms that he saw her masturbate and surprisingly, she was cool with it. The next day, James from the window saw Sophie and Henry having a chill time together. He not only gets jealous, but he feels threatened and goes back to meet Julian to find a solution to this problem. Julian tells him that the robot only acts on what its masters want. James gets back home and gives a stern warning to Henry not to interact with his wife again. Henry is sad and he tells Sophie. Sophie confronts James about this and they once again have a heated argument. Their relationship isn't as smooth as it used to be and Sophie decides to leave for a few days. Enough time for them to rethink and chill out. Now, it's just Henry and James at home. One night, James is in the bathroom and he tells James to bring his shaving stick. James comes naked and things take an unexpected turn and James kisses Henry. The next day, James calls his wife to make amends and wants her back home. She comes back to the mansion to see Henry. While massaging her, Henry kisses her also and whispers the magic phrase, "I love you." This disturbs Sophie as she doesn't expect the robot to have that type of feeling. James comes back home and he meets Sophie. She tells him about what happened between her and Henry, and as expected, James is angry. He yells at Sophie and tells her that she always wanted to kiss the robot, as it only acts on what its masters want. James also goes to meet Henry and he whacks him across the face and disconnects its charging station. The next day, they invite Julian to the house to put Henry to rest. But Julian comes later and James leaves for work. As James leaves, Henry comes to meet Sophie and talk to her about how sacred and unhappy he is about them disconnecting his charging station. He knows he is about to get replaced. He also tells Sophie about what happened between him and James in the bathroom. Julian arrives, but Sophie wants to talk to James instead. She just walks past him and heads to James's office. Both of them talk about how they messed up, and they reconcile. Henry, on the other hand, is observing his nurses and he is surprised he is bleeding. He gets the idea that he is human. Julian walks in on him and gives him an order, but Henry refuses. He comforts Julian for lying to him about him being human. Turns out Julian is a fraud. All his robots are actually humans that he trained when they were very little kids. For example, he adopted Henry when he was 3 after his parents abandoned him. The couple goes with 2 FBI agents to their house to capture Julian, but Julian with a shotgun shoots the agents. He then turns his attention to James and Sophie, and before he shoots, Henry pounces on him and beats him to death with the shotgun. Henry also feels betrayed and ashamed for what he did to his masters, James and Sophie, kills himself. As the movie ends, we see that 5 years later, the couple have their kid, whom they named Henry.